Good evening, and welcome back to
Thou Writeth, We Revieweth. It is December 18th, 1606, and hark. In today's podcast, we will be discussing William Shakespeare's newest play that has been all the rage here in London.
Indeed, after Mr. Shakespeare and his Lord Chamberlain's men performed Macbeth for His Majesty King James I, the people couldn't have enough of the story of the Scottish general.
So, without further ado, scene 1 of the first act begins in the setting of a lightning storm.
And amid the storm are three witches.
They are discussing where to meet Scottish General Macbeth upon his return from battle.
The three eventually decide on meeting in, quote, the open field, and begin simultaneously chanting the phrase, fair is foul and foul is fair.
The next scene cuts to a wounded soldier and his brothers in arms, Lennox, Ross, and Angus, reporting to King Duncan the latest news on their battle against the Irish invaders.
The noblemen note generals Macbeth and Banquo's exemplary performances on the battlefield, specifically that of Macbeth's, Duncan's first cousin. After it becomes known that Macbeth had victoriously killed the opposing tyrant Macdonald, King Duncan decides to gift Macbeth the title of Thane of Cawdor.
Scene 3 reintroduces the three witches who call themselves the Weird Sisters. They are at their designated location to await Macbeth's return and share with him their prophecies.
Macbeth and his best friend Banquo encounter the Weird Sisters shortly thereafter. Startled, they begin voicing their confusion as to who these creatures are, if they're dead or alive, or if they can speak.
Suddenly, the sisters begin to hail Macbeth for being the Thane of Glamis, which was true, Thane of Cawdor, which was true, however, unbeknownst to Macbeth, and finally, King of Scotland.
The latter of the three prophecies especially baffled the friends.
Before vanishing abruptly, the witches shared their last prophecy, that being Banquo fathering a line of royal descendants.
Banquo and Macbeth, all hail, one cries.
Subsequently, Ross and Angus enter to share the news of Macbeth's new title.
Macbeth stood dumbfounded, as now two of the three prophecies have been proven to be true.
He stood in a daze, contemplating how he could possibly become king. The thought then strikes him that if fate does not do the job, perhaps he could himself.
Horrified that he could conjure such an idea, Macbeth considers the option of murdering Duncan, so as to inheriting the topmost place on the kingdom's hierarchy.
Fast forward to final scene of Act 1, we see Lady Macbeth already in the loop due to a letter she'd received from her husband that explained the witch's endeavors.
Like Macbeth, Lady Macbeth already weighed the option of killing Duncan. She, however, felt a greater sense of confidence and collectedness in the idea.
After Macbeth arrives home, the couple decides that tonight, when Duncan stays for dinner, is when he will be killed.
Eventually, Duncan, his sons Malcolm and Donalbain, Banquo, and Scottish noblemen Macduff, Lennox, Ross, and Angus arrive at Macbeth's castle on Dunsinane Hill for dinner. They are greeted by Lady Macbeth.
Macbeth, on the other hand, does not come out to greet his guests until the dinner is almost over. Resuming at the next act, Act 2, Scene 1, begins with innocent chatter amongst best friends, Macbeth and Banquo, as the other guests head off to bed.
What follows is a soliloquy in which Macbeth speaks to himself in anticipation for Duncan's murder.
He sees a dagger and feels as though it is, quote, leading him towards the place he was going already, Duncan's room. He questions his own sanity, whether or not he's hallucinating.
The scene ends with Macbeth acknowledging his fears and that they will only impede with what he must do.
We then see Lady Macbeth by herself awaiting her husband's return.
Macbeth then enters, a bloody dagger in hand, and announces, quote, I have done the deed.
Almost immediately, Macbeth begins to feel profound guilt and discomfort for what he has done.
Lady Macbeth, on the other hand, would have none of it. She asked that Macbeth go smear the blood from his dagger on the sleeping guards to make them appear guilty.
When Macbeth expressed his fear of seeing the murdered Duncan, his wife proceeded to call him a coward, and that such a fear is only acceptable with children. Macbeth eventually complies.
The next morning, Macduff and Lennox return to Dunsinane to wake the early king at his request.
The castle porter, also known as the doorkeeper, was terribly drunk from the previous night, and instead of immediately responding to the nobleman's knocking, he pretended as though he was the gatekeeper to hell.
Knock, knock, who's there? He would repeatedly yell.
That sounds destined to be a famous phrase, doesn't it?
Like the first line of a joke, perhaps.
After the porter allows Macduff and Lennox into the castle, they are greeted by Macbeth, who then brings the former to Duncan's room.
In extreme distress, Macduff exits the room yelling horror after finding that the king had been viciously murdered.
The other guests are now awake from the ruckus of Macduff's discovery, including Banquo, Ross, McCallum, Donalbain, and Lady Macbeth.
To further encourage his facade as a posthumous hero of the king's, and also to eliminate any sources of doubt about his story, Macbeth kills the two servants, whom everybody believes to be guilty of the killing.
Upon learning of their father's murder, Malcolm and Donalbain decide to flee England and Ireland respectively. They are now fearful for their own lives.
Due to the brothers' decision to exile, Macbeth is now King of Scotland.
All of the prophecies that the Weird Sisters laid forth for Macbeth at last came true.
We then see Macbeth, now king, explaining to Banquo the guilty impression left by Duncan's sons when they fled the country.
Banquo then begins to joke that Macbeth likely played us foully to prompt Duncan's death.
He reminds Macbeth that since the sisters' visions have thus far been true, Macbeth's children will not follow him to the throne, but Banquo's will. But hush, no more, he teases to Macbeth.
Immediately following Banquo's remark, Macbeth inquires about Banquo's plan for the afternoon.
Banquo explains that he and his son Fleance will be going riding and will return after sunset.
Following Banquo's departure, Macbeth asks his servant to bring in two guests.
These two guests are subsequently identified as hitmen that Macbeth hired for Banquo, his best friend and brother-in-arms.
Macbeth and his guests ensuingly discuss how the killing will play out and make their final plan.
While awaiting the killing, Macbeth further confesses his feelings of shame to his wife about the hole in which he dug himself.
Lady Macbeth then tells him to at least put on a cheerful face for their guests and accept that, quote, "What's done is done."
In the following scene, about a mile away from Dunsinane, the sun is down and the murderers are out awaiting their target.
As they hear the sound of Banquo's and Fleacence's horses and see the light of their torches, the murderers make their presence known and attack the father and son. Wailing that his son must fly, fly, fly away from the horror, Banquo dies instantly and his son escapes.
Wow, to be or not to be indeed.
Back at the castle arrives Ross, Lennox, and the other lords for the feast hosted by their king.
Before the dinner, however, one of the murderers appears at Macbeth's door to report what has happened.
Macbeth is relieved that Banquo is now out of the picture, but due to Fleance's escape, his fear for the security of his royal lineage worsens.
Upon raising a toast to his guests, Macbeth returns to his seat, only to find it occupied by none other than Banquo.
Realizing that he is seeing Banquo's ghost, Macbeth cries for answers as to who could pull such a prank on him.
The sight will not go away, and as Macbeth grows increasingly frantic, his guests begin to worry that the king is unwell.
Lady Macbeth, however, whispers to her husband that he must man up, stop this nonsense, and overcome the hallucination.
She then escorts the guests out of the castle and wishes them a good night.
A ghost was at the feast, huh?
Like a ghost at the feast. That sounds like another idiom in the making.
The fun was spoiled like a ghost at the feast.
Fasting forward to the end of Act 3, we see the characters finally catching up to Macbeth's pretense that the recent murders have been nothing but tragic coincidences.
Lennox and the Scottish lord are brainstorming the possibilities of who could be behind such chaos.
When Lennox realizes that Macbeth's mournful demeanor following both Duncan and Banquo's murders seemed too picture-perfect, he eliminated all other suspects from his mind.
On board with Lennox's theory, the Scottish lord shares what he has heard about Malcolm since he fled the country.
Malcolm, having fled to England, is now in cahoots with King Edward, historically known as Edward the Confessor.
Macduff has also turned to the neighboring kingdom and is currently recruiting the English army to help and end the now notorious Macbeth's reign of terror.
When Macbeth requested that Macduff return home, says the Lord, the latter responded by letter, "Sir, not I."
This provoked great anger inside Macbeth and prompted him to officially declare war on Macduff's army.
Now, to pause matters on a cliffhanger, let us play a ditty that was a sensation in the court of Queen Elizabeth I. We shall return for the final two acts of Macbeth after William Byrd's harpsichord hit The Bells.
And we are back, and hey-ho, was that a fair piece.
Acts 4 and 5 serve as the climax of the play, so we are now in for some action.
The fourth act is set in a cave, and outsiding it is thundering, obviously implying who's inside.
The witches are hard at work, brewing a spell of some sort in their cauldron.
Assisting them is Hecate, the goddess of witchcraft, who has grown angry that the sisters have cursed Macbeth without her permission.
However, she has now decided to help them continue what they had started.
Macbeth then enters and demands for answers as to what he must do and to what his future holds.
The witches comply and summon 3 ghostly heads.
They respectively hint to Macbeth his fate.
The first ghost, clothed in armor, warns Macbeth to beware of Macduff.
The second ghost, resembling a blood-covered child, tells Macbeth that he can never be harmed by a man who was, quote, born of woman.
As the third and final ghost appears before Macbeth's eyes, this time a crowned child holding a tree, the thunder exacerbates.
The ghost tells Macbeth that unless Birnam Wood arrives in Dunsinane, Macbeth will go on to be undefeated.
Macbeth was dumbfounded. How can an entire forest be pulled out of the ground and plunked onto his property? He demanded that he simply know if Banquo's children will bore future kings.
Seek to know no more, the witches tell him in unison before summoning a final group of ghosts.
Macbeth then observes 8 marching kings, followed by the return of Banquo's ghost.
Horrified at the sight of that dreadful ghost, Macbeth grows angry and realizes that these kings have descended from Banquo. He begs that this is not true.
The witches confirm his notion and vanish.
Contemplating what the witches had said, Macbeth decides to invade Macduff's castle and murder his entire family as a warning that he must not pursue his plans he has with King Edward's army.
A short while later, at Macduff's castle, arrives a messenger to alert Lady Macbeth and her son of the incoming danger.
Already distressed by Macduff's absence, Lady Macduff panics and the messenger wishes her good luck before heading out the door.
Macbeth's hitmen then surprise Lady Macduff and her son.
The murderers scream that their husband and father is a traitor and begin stabbing the two.
Instantly, Macduff's son dies, and after a short pursuit, the murderers finish off his mother.
Down in England, we then see Malcolm and Macduff talking man to man about their doubts and fears of going to war and fighting up against the power-craving Macbeth. Malcolm especially is having second thoughts.
Macduff compares the evilness of Macbeth to that of the devils in hell, expressing that even Lucifer could not top Macbeth in wickedness.
After rehashing all that Macbeth has done to turn their once stable land into anarchy, Malcolm decides the battle must be fought.
He explains to Macduff that English General Old Seward already has 10,000 English soldiers ready to defeat Macbeth, therefore increasing their chances of victory.
The two then get interrupted by a surprise visit from Ross.
Ross came to England with 2 intentions: to help his country and fellow noblemen, and to give them the tragic scoop on what has been going on since they left.
He first updates Macduff and Malcolm on the condition of their kingdom, explaining that it is now a place where, quote, sighs and groans and shrieks rend the air.
Then, Ross finally breaks the news that Macduff's entire family had been murdered, including his wife and all of his children.
Macduff feels great guilt for his absence and a yearning for the goodness of the past, but he instead turns his grief into stimulation to fulfill his noble duties and save Scotland.
The men decide that it is time to notify King Edward that their army is prepared and ready to assemble all of the troops. Back in Scotland, we are at Dunsinane with the doctor and a waiting gentlewoman, similar to a lady-in-waiting, observing a sleepwalking Lady Macbeth.
Having succumbed to her own feelings of guilt after conspiring the murders of King Duncan and Banquo, the Queen has gone mad.
In the midst of her sleepwalking, Lady Macbeth is seen wiping her hands continuously, crying that her hands will never be clean of Lady Macduff's blood. "Oh, oh, oh," she hollers, as she begs that the smell of blood would go away.
Her doctor and the gentlewoman are watching her with pity as she ever so fearfully tries to reassure herself that Banquo cannot leave his grave.
After Lady Macbeth's fit subsides, she returns to bed, and her doctor reminds the gentlewoman to carefully keep an eye on the Queen so she does not harm herself.
Still in England, Lennox and Ross, assisted by noblemen Caithness and Menteith, and the Scottish forces are prepared to join Macduff's army.
They begin to march to Birnam Wood, the location where the two armies will meet to advance as a group on Dunsinane Hill.
Meanwhile, at the castle, Macbeth is still dwelling on the sisters' prophecies. Specifically, he is fixated on the last two, that those who will bring him harm cannot be born of woman, and that he will meet his end when Birnam Wood arrives in Dunsinane.
Macbeth, overridden with a sense of invincibility, is ready for battle.
But his opponents are drawing near. The Scottish and English armies have arrived in Birnam Wood Forest.
Before advancing on Macbeth's castle, the soldiers, including Malcolm, Macduff, Menteith, Caithness, Angus, Lennox, Ross, and the old and young Seawards, decide to collect some branches for a disguise to baffle Macbeth's spies.
Birnam Wood is about to invade Dunsinane.
While awaiting the arrival of Macduff's army, the tension at Dunsinane is broken by a woman's cry.
A servant goes to investigate the commotion, and when they return, they announce to Macbeth that his wife has committed suicide.
Almost carelessly, Macbeth, speaking from his newfound superiority complex, acknowledges that all individuals will die one day, and that life is simply a waiting period until death.
A messenger then enters the room and confirms what Macbeth has been dreading. He saw movement in the Birnam Wood forest.
In denial, but panicked, Macbeth accuses him of being a liar and a slave.
Following this observation, Macduff's army discards their branches and forges ahead to Macbeth's castle.
Young Seward makes his presence known, calling out who's there.
With hesitance, we hear the response, "My name's Macbeth."
Following their brief encounter, Macbeth kills young Seward without delay. Swords I smile at, weapons laugh to scorn, brandished by man that's of a woman born, Macbeth boastfully says.
As the two armies continue to eagerly fight, their two leaders, Macbeth and Macduff, meet again.
Livid at what Macbeth has done to his family and land, Macduff forcefully demands that Macbeth turn around and face him.
He tells Macbeth that he has no further words and his sword will only do the talking. A fight breaks out, and amid this fight, the men profess their hatred for each other.
After being told by Macbeth that his endeavor to kill him is a waste of time, as he was born of woman, Macduff tells the tyrant that he was cut out of his mother before she can naturally bore him.
Macbeth stops and is appalled. He now accepts that he has indeed been cursed by the weird sisters, and that he will soon die. His dignity, however, makes him fight to the end.
A call of victory can then be heard as Macduff's army reunites, but they are confused as to where their fellow soldiers, Macduff and young Seward, are.
Mournfully, the troops acknowledge their simultaneous victory and loss.
Then, all of a sudden, Seward observes someone approaching from afar. It was Macduff, triumphantly carrying Macbeth's head.
Talk about to be or not to be.
"Hail King," Macduff announces to Malcolm, "for so thou art." Before trumpet,
"Hail King of Scotland," the men hollered. Malcolm, the true King of Scotland, now proclaims all of his troops earls, the first to exist in Scotland.
Before trumpets play, he promises his kingdom's stability, the restoration of tranquility and order, and invites everybody to his crowning. A new era has dawned.
So, that, everybody, was another spectacular work of England's favorite playwright, Mr. William Shakespeare.
I must say that from his usage of dramatic irony to pathetic fallacy, Mr. Shakespeare did an outstanding job poetically and at keeping me at the edge of my seat.
Yes, it was incredible how the thunder corresponds with what the witches had in mind, and how fate and the progression of time managed to sneak its way into the witches' success.
Agreed. The witches had to find any way to rewrite the future. I've even heard some dub Lady Macbeth the fourth sister.
So, there's a theory for our listeners to entertain. Why does Lady Macbeth deserve this label? We will leave it at that.
We would like to take this time to honorably mention Mr. Shakespeare, Mr. Bird for sharing his outstanding harpsichord talent, explorer Sir Walter Raleigh for tuning in, and of course, His Majesty King James I.
This is Thou Writeth, We Revieweth, signing off.